Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to a brand new video, brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining me once again. Hopefully the audio is much better now. Many of you have been suggesting to me to get a microphone, this and that, and I finally figured it out how to connect microphone to my iPhone 11 here. And that is the device that I use for majority of my videos. Today I have a book that I would like to not review but let you guys know of, and this is Pagan Christianity. Pagan Christianity is this is published by Tyndale, so it is a Christian publication. Written by two authors, really great authors, and this is basically about the practices and the religion of Christianity in a whole. The author here has done, in about 9 chapters, if I'm not mistaken, present that the practices of the Christian church, the practices of the Christian church, 12 chapters, sorry. In 12 chapters, this author has presented, the authors have presented that actually the practices of the Christian church, the Catholic Church, and so on and so forth, is actually the practices derives from pagan practices. Okay, so the concluding, again, this is up for readers to read themselves, but I conclude that majority of the practices here, now I do not entirely agree with all the practices that the author have written here, but I would say majority, about 9 or so, I agree that these practices derive from paganism, and it has crept into the religions of Christianity. Now, I'll not be going into details because I do not want to I believe in all of my book that I've reviewed, in all the videos I've reviewed books, I've somehow give the details and things like that. And so I do not want to give any spoiler because this book is really worth for you to actually discover it for yourself. It is not that long. I would say it's about 250 pages minus the bibliography and so on and so forth. And what's really great about this book is that there's questions and answer right at the end. So like majority of the questions that people have, the author somehow answer it here. And this portion is called Delving Deeper. Yeah, Delving Deeper. Hopefully it's not flip, because it is flip when it's showing on my camera. Yep, so Pagan Christianity, this is really worth the read. And you'll be surprised that a lot of these practices, and Christians themselves, when I engage with them, they're surprised that they do not even know where some of these practices actually comes from. Now, I do not want to go through this book with you because it's very sensitive, and that is also the reason why I do not want to narrate some of the stuff in here, because it could be, I just want to be mindful to my Christian brothers and sisters out there. But read this book with an open mind, because it is published by a Christian publication, Tyndale House. But I just want to explore this book approach this book from a different angle, I must say. Pagan Christianity, with a question mark there. There's a question mark. And so the authors, the readers, have to decide for themselves. Well, if you read this book, you already know what the authors think about religion of Christianity, but that's besides the point. But to you readers and us readers, can we really conclude that if every single practices in our religion derives from, for example, a different religion, does that really mean that our religion is not true, in a sense? So this is a good question. For example, some of the practices from Christianity in the religion of Christianity comes from pagan practices of the past. Does that really makes Christianity untrue? Okay, does that mean that Christianity is not from God? And so this is a huge question that we must ponder upon. Um, and so, for example, if you take a look at from a different angle, for example, Judaism. Okay, some of the practices of Christianity actually derives from Judaism. So does that mean that Christianity is not a true religion and Judaism is a true religion? Um, Again, I have my own conclusion, but I'm not going to reveal it here because I want you guys to really think about this for yourself. But if we were to have that kind of mindset, for example, if something else comes from something else, then that something else that comes from that something else, hopefully you're following along here, is not true, or if it's true, then does it change our theology? Does it change? Obviously, it will not change the course of history, because history cannot be changed. It's already the past. But does it change the way you look at things? Now, some of these, for example, I do not want to name names, but there are this New Testament scholar had passed away, and he was born a Jew, and then he converted to Christianity, and then he reverted back to Judaism, because having found that a lot of practices of a lot of the practices in Christianity was actually changed by Paul. Because Jesus said a certain thing and then Paul preached a different thing, and so this person believed that Christianity is actually a corrupted form of Judaism, and so he reverted back to Judaism. Whereas there are different people out there that believe that Christianity superseded Judaism, and this is, again, I would argue, Paul's view. Okay, Paul viewed it this way. Okay, he looks at things from a very despite being a Pharisee himself, although a lot of Orthodox Jews and rabbis actually do not believe that Paul was a Pharisee, meaning he is a fake Pharisee. But let's just take Paul's word for what it is, and and if we look at things from Paul's perspective. By the way, this is actually really interesting. We do not actually know what Pharisees think, because we do not have early writings from a Pharisee except from Paul. Now, it should also be said that the earliest writings that we have from Paul came from the 3rd century onwards, the 4th century onwards, in complete form. Okay, all the complete epistles of Paul that we have in the New Testament today came around the year 350. Okay, and so that is the manuscripts, the extant manuscripts that we have. But when it comes to the narrative perspective, Paul is the only writings that we have that comes from a 1st century Pharisee, early 1st century Pharisee. Now, Paul was probably writing 1 Thessalonians to Romans around the year 48 to around 60, and so about 12 years or so. And so we do have writings from Paul, the Pharisee. And so if we were to look at things from Paul's perspective, can we say or assume that all Pharisees in the 1st century look at things the way Paul did? The answer is obviously no. And the answer could also be yes, because there is no evidence. So we cannot argue for what it is, because there is literally no evidence. In fact, the strongest evidence that we have, on an example that we have, is from Paul himself, a Pharisee. But we cannot conclude that all Pharisees think like Paul, because no one would take that for it is, because that is absolutely not true. Even within Orthodox Jews, or even within Jews in the time of the Talmud Mishnah, the early period, they disagree with one another, and that is why we have the commentary. And so we cannot take Paul's word for it is. In fact, Orthodox Jews would really disown Paul. At least the yeah, the more, you want to call right wing kind of Orthodox Jews. And so if Paul says something, okay, and then Jesus says something else, okay, and Paul changes some of these, or actually incorporated some of these paganistic practices into his congregation, okay, his church, which predominantly were made up of Gentile, meaning non-Jews. Does that mean that the Christianity that Paul preached is actually not true? Okay. And this is something that we need to compare with Jesus, because a lot of scholars believe that Jesus was a Jew, okay, and he abrogated some of the law of Moses. Okay, like for example, curing curing the sick man, or allowing his disciples to pluck grain and things like that. Though we do have some commentaries that suggest that actually healing someone on the Sabbath is actually not considered as work, because all Jesus did was actually use his spittle to cure someone, and that is actually not work. And so what does it mean then to work? And so this is what the rabbis argue in the Talmud Mishnah. And so you can go read about that. I've read some of the obviously, if you want to read the whole corpus, Orthodox Jews spend at least 7 to 10 years to study that. It's just like Muslims studying Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, the Sitta, for example. And so it would take a long time, and yeah, you have to keep at it. But anyway, without going astray, I really recommend this book, Pagan Christianity, with a question mark, which is very important, because readers need to think for themselves. Christians and non-Christians alike. I believe this is a really great book to read. Now, if there's one book that you want to use, or a couple of books that you want to get into the field of debates and things like that, this is definitely one of the book that you want to have in your arsenal, because there's tons of evidence in here, and this is just not mere speculation. This is all supported by evidence, which pretty much contemporary scholars accept as well. But yeah, I do not agree with everything this author had written in here, but I would say I agree for the most part, about 80% or so. But yeah, anyway, my name's Arfat, and I'll see you guys on my next video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.